Hello and welcome to livealittlehigher.com. This week we read Parasha Vayeishev, the famous parasha in which Joseph is sold by his brothers because he's very much hated by them into slavery, and he's taken down to Egypt. And we see how this boy Joseph, he was just 17 years old when he came into Egypt, a very extremely handsome boy, and he ends up in the house of a very important man called Potiphar. He was a very, very important man in Egypt, and he becomes a slave there, and he becomes a master to his master because, you know, he had charm, he was intelligent, and he was smart, and he was hardworking, and so he takes a very big liking to Joseph, and he makes him like the right hand of his house. And what happens there is that his wife likes this boy. She finds him very attractive. She wants to really have a relationship with him. She's seducing him. It says in the Torah, in the Midrash, that she used to wear different clothes during the day to seduce him, like what she wore in the morning she wouldn't wear in the afternoon, and what she wore at night was not what she wore in the afternoon. And she became very, very fixated with this young man, and she really wanted to seduce him and have an intimate relationship with him. So we see that there came a day in which was a national holiday in Egypt. It was a day that people went to worship the idols, and the Torah describes it as that it came that fateful day when he entered the house to do his work, and none of the household staff was inside, and the only person that was inside this house was actually Potiphar's wife, who was waiting for him. And so the question is, what does the Torah mean that he came to do his work? What he came actually to do was to have a relationship with this woman. That's what he came to do. But at the end, he had a vision of his father. He saw the face of his father, and he couldn't do it, and he ran away from this huge temptation. And the story goes that she was able to grab onto his cloak, and then she said that he was trying to rape her. And because of this, he ended up 12 years in a prison in Egypt. And we see that it's astonishing how this boy that was hated by the brothers, was sold into slavery, ended up in Egypt, at the end in a prison, at the end became the viceroy of Egypt, the most important person in Egypt apart from Pharaoh. So the question is, why was this episode recorded in such detail in the Torah? Because it's like a telenovela, it's like a soap opera, really. Like all these episodes is like a soap opera. And nothing that's written in the Torah really is more or less. It's just exact. It needs to convey a message to us that is transgenerational, that it applies to us today in our days. And so the objective of these Torah chapters is to relate the story of how the first Jewish family came into Egypt. So by Joseph having to live through all these ordeal in his life, this was the beginning of the preparation of the Jewish people coming into Egypt and relocating in Egypt with that big famine that they experienced later on. So why did the Torah find it necessary to relate the story of Joseph, of his ugly struggle with his master's wife? Why is this put there? Why is it important for us to know about this? Why is it important, all the details and the details of his imprisonment, of him being put into jail? So the Midrash explains the meaning of the phrase that Joseph entered the house to do his work, and none of the household staff was there. And what type of work did he come to do? And the Midrash says the work Joseph came to do was to yield to her advances. So when he came that day, he was going to have a good time. That's why he was going. And after all of her unceasing pleas, Joseph finally succumbed to her temptations, and he was ready to materialize this relationship, and he was stopped when he saw the face of his father. And so here again, one must ask, what was it about Jacob's visage that inspired Joseph to deny such powerful temptation? What in that face of his father, what did he see that was able to stop him in his tracks and just run out and not fall into this huge temptation? And this is why he's known as Joseph Hatzadik. No other brother of his. There were all tzaddikim, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron. Nobody else in the Torah is named Hatzadik except Joseph, and it is precisely because he was able to contain himself and not fall into a sexual temptation, which is something very hard to contain. So let us reflect more closely on the psychological and physical conditions of Joseph during that day when he was almost allured into this relationship. We have to understand he was an 18-year-old boy from a foreign country. He was a young guy with all his hormones in bloom, and he was alone. He was very lonely. He was a Jew, and this was something very rare in Egypt. There were no Jewish people there. So he was basically alienated from society. He was like a slave. He was lonely, and he felt unloved, and he felt that he was almost killed by his brothers. Imagine the feeling that he had. Like, a trauma is understated for him. So he did not have friends. He did not have family. And he thought, the father thought he was dead. So also he was thinking about his father, how he was dealing with this. And he was hated by his brothers. So one would only imagine the profound sense of loneliness that must have pervaded him at that time. And in context, one can see, like, okay, this beautiful woman wants to take care of him, wants to make him feel loved and wanted. Like, you could say, okay, it would be normal for him to fall into this temptation. And we wouldn't see it such a horrible thing, because mentally we could rationalize the act. And we see that here, really, the Torah, what it's telling us is that really this act would have been completely immoral for him to end up with a married woman, even though the Torah was not given yet, and he wouldn't have been paying for a sin as if the Torah was given. But nevertheless, it was an immoral thing, and he knew it. He knew it was not okay to end up with the wife of someone else. So we see that here, that this wife of Potiphar, she had so much power, and she could put Joseph to live the life in paradise, an idyllic life, or she could just ruin his life. And he decided that, okay, let her ruin my life, because I'm not going to be able to live with a good conscience, thinking that I did something that was not okay. So we see that what was the secret of his rectitude, of him being such a righteous human being, and what empowered such a lonely person to be able to stay strong and not fall into these temptations. And the Talmud presents an oral Jewish tradition that says the beauty of Jacob reflected the beauty of Adam. And so the first human being, Adam HaRishon, who we know sinned, he was the first person to sin, the first person to go against Hashem's desires, Hashem's will. He knew that this Adam had changed the whole history for humanity because of this sin that he committed, and he changed it forever. Till today we're paying for that. Till today humanity is paying for that original sin. And so you think that, okay, I do something insignificant in my life, something that only concerns me and the person involved. Nobody's gonna be hurt, nobody's gonna know, it's not gonna make a difference either in anybody's life. But at the end, he realized, like, eating from a single fruit from a tree that was prohibited, look what made such a mess in the world. So why? Because every single human being is part of the knot. We're not separate entities. We think, okay, I'm me and you're you, and whatever I do in my life has nothing to do with you, live and let live. And yes, it sounds very nice, but at the end of the day, everything I do has an effect on your life, and everything you do has an effect on my life. And not only my life, in the world as a whole. And we're interconnected. It says, Hasidut teaches that the butterflies moving their wings in Thailand can have an effect of a tsunami somewhere else on the other side of the globe. So we do have unconscious capacity to change world events with our behaviors. We know from COVID, if we learned something from that, an invisible virus that nobody could see except on a telescope, on a petri dish. People can see it, can smell it, can nothing, and suddenly it took over the world, got everybody sick. I think there's rarely one person in this world that didn't get it. And we see how one insignificant little virus can really create such havoc in the world, not only health-wise, but also economics, the banks, inflation, everything. It disrupted the whole system. So we see that it's true what the Torah is telling us here. That's why it takes such detail into showing every little act that happened that day, how he ran away, how she grabbed his cloak, how he was put in prison. Everything is recorded, because really what this Torah portion is trying to tell us is that a little thing that a person does can change the world forever. And so this is the reason for the Torah recording of this story. And we have to remember that during our lonely moments of misery, when people are sad and miserable and angry, and we're seeing so much of that today, and feel that nobody cares about them and that they're indifferent, we have to see that we have to be morally upright people, that we cannot fall into immorality, because this not only is not gonna fix the problem, it's gonna make it worse. And so here, Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, he says, if only you open your eyes, you will see the visage of your Father whispering to you through the silent winds of history that you're not isolated, a creature in a titanic world whose behavior is inconsequential. At this very moment, God needs you and me to bring redemption to the world. So what we have to see here is that we must, it's very important, we must have moral clarity. We must have people that we look up to, people that are righteous individuals, that are in their conduct, they're flawless, and we should really try to be like them. It's not that we're meant to be tzaddikim, but we at least can emulate their ways, and we can try to be like these very holy people in this world and act accordingly to that, and not fall into temptations that eventually will create a worse outcome to us. I read a beautiful story of a rabbi, a joke, however you want to call it. A rabbi, a man comes to him and he says, Rabbi, I have a lot of problems. I have these very bad thoughts in my head. They're driving me crazy. How do I get rid of them? It's so hard. And the rabbi said, it's not hard. It's not hard. There's one word you need to put in your head. No. No. Every time you have a bad thought, and every time you have a temptation to do something that is not right, no. Just say no. No, I can't do this. I come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I come from this holy nation. How can I ever do this? How can I do this to my Father in heaven? Just say no. Get that word in your mouth. Become Mr. No. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. No, it's not right. It's not right. This is not what the Torah says. I should live like this. And this is part of why this is so important to learn in detail, because we have to understand that really we can always say no. We always have that choice to not fall into the wrong side. So I want to wish you a blessed week. This is the week of Hanukkah. Hag Sameach. May the light of Hanukkah shine within you, that you should take it with you everywhere you go, and that we should see revealed, open miracles, like the miracles of the story of Hanukkah, in which a few fought against many, and they won that war, and the miracle of the oil, which really lit up the world for 8 days. A little jug of 1 day ended up being bright and lighting the world for 8 days. So we should see these types of miracles in our days, and we should connect to the truth. So remember, live a little higher. Thank you.